SAT grammar questions are actually pretty simple once you know the rules. In this video, I'm going to cover every type of grammar question that you're going to encounter on the SAT. The first thing that apostrophes can do is show possession. And let's look at some examples here because within this, there's actually a lot of detailed rules that we need to go over. We'll start with singular nouns. So your basic, normal singular noun, all you're going to do is put an apostrophe and then an S. So if Juliana has a cat, we could say Juliana's cat is really mean. But for these weirder ones that are singular, but they actually end in an S, like the name James, it's one person, James, but his name happens to end in an S. In these cases, we have two options. We can either put an apostrophe after the S, or we can put an apostrophe and then an additional S. When we say this out loud, it sounds the same. We would say James's cat is very sweet. So a lot of my students have gotten confused about why we would just have an apostrophe there, but that is certainly an option. So keep that in mind. Moving on to plural subjects, we've got our normal, which in this case does end in S. It's normal for this to end in S. So we could say the cat's tails are so fluffy. And because it ends in an S, we basically do the same thing that we would do with the weird singular. We add an apostrophe after the S. Keep in mind though, we do not have the option of adding that additional apostrophe S for plural endings. It's just an apostrophe at the end of the word. So the sentence here means there were many cats, all of their tails are fluffy. Now there's weird ones. If a plural noun does not end in an S, it is weird. The technical term for this is irregular for all my fancy pants students out there. You know who you are. And for those irregular plural nouns, we're going to do the same thing that we would do for singular nouns. Just an apostrophe, and then we add an S. So since children is already plural, we could say the children's cats have no right to eat my dinner, right? More than one child is children. Now there's one more thing to consider. What if we have a plural subject, but it indicates two individuals? For example, if we had Maria and Omar, what do we do with apostrophes? So here it says, Maria's and Omar's cats are both beautiful. Now notice it says individual possession. This means Maria has a cat and Omar has a cat, and both cats are beautiful. In this case, we want to show possession for Maria and for Omar, right? But if we have a shared possession, Robert and Natalie's cat is ugly. There's one cat that belongs to both Robert and Natalie. We only need to show possession on the last noun in the list. So here we only have two people. If you had 10 people, we would list all of them. The apostrophe would just go on the last noun in that list. And that covers all of the possession that you're going to need to worry about on the SAT. Of course, we also have to keep in mind that apostrophes have a second thing they do, which is to form contractions. This is bringing two words together into one. And the way that they do this is by sticking themselves in the middle of the new word to replace any letters that we lost. So you can see I plus am is I'm, right? The apostrophe goes right in the middle there. It replaces the A that we lost. We can see this in a lot of common contractions. It can work for proper nouns. So like, even though we could have dad's possessive, we can also do the same thing to say dad is. Dad is would also be dad's. So the only difference is context. If we see dad's going to rescue the cats, we know it's dad is because dad can't possess a verb, right? Dad can't possess going, but it looks the same. So that can be a little bit confusing, which is why I bring it up. And then there's, countless contractions that you're probably familiar with. So I won't go into them. And those are the only two rules for apostrophes, but I do want to consider one more thing, which is pronouns. And I know that we're getting outside of punctuation at this point, but it's important because these pronouns end up getting involved with punctuation and sometimes confusing us. So I'll show you what I mean. It's versus its. If possession is usually shown with an apostrophe, what's going on here? Which one of these means it's possessive? And if you want to take a guess, go for it. But it's with an apostrophe is going to be it is. It's without an apostrophe is actually possessive. So this kind of breaks the rule. And with these pronouns, just remember the contraction is the one that takes the apostrophe. If they're battling it out and one of them gets to have the apostrophe, it's the contraction that takes it. There, and there. There's going to be location. There with an EIR is going to be our possessive. And again, we follow that rule that the contraction takes the apostrophe. So they are, there is going to be they are, and it takes the apostrophe. Whose versus whose, you should be able to guess because of that rule I told you, which one's going to take the apostrophe. That's right, it's going to be the contraction, who is, and then whose without an apostrophe is possessive. So those are all the rules for you. And I know we worked quickly through that, so definitely come back to the beginning of the video, use the timestamps, and check these rules out again if you need to reference them as we go through these practice problems. All right, our first example here is rated as an easy one, so take a look, pause the video, try it on your own first, but let's talk about it. For apostrophe-based questions, I still put them in the same category as other punctuation questions. You can usually get away with just reading the sentence with the underlined portion, but every once in a while you might need context to check whether something's supposed to be plural or singular. So here we have, due to the moon's gravitational pull. All right, and right there, I know gravitational pull belongs to the moon. I know there's only one moon. I could also read this first sentence, Earth is not a perfect sphere. So I know it's talking about our moon, of which there's only one. So it would be singular possessive, which should just be an apostrophe S, which is A. And when you're not feeling super confident, definitely eliminate answers before you choose an answer. I just was 100% sure that was the answer, so we're good. And I've actually got a bonus tip for you, which is to boop that like button for me. All right, let's get things a little bit more challenging here with a medium question. This one is one big long sentence, so I'll just start from the beginning. Slam poet Acevedo's debut novel, The Poet X, winner of the 2018 National Book Award for Young People's Literature. And just to kind of simplify things, I'd probably ignore this big ol' comma sandwich here. I might even say this novel, or better yet, Poet X. Poet X is composed of poems putatively written by the novel's protagonist, 15-year-old. Okay, and then I would also ignore this because this is extra information. So all we're focusing on are the poems possessive? Because I'm seeing in the answer choices we have options to make the poems possessive. We have the word putatively, which is not a noun. You cannot possess an adverb. So I can get rid of B and C for that reason. And then the novel's protagonist. Does the protagonist belong to the novel? Yes, every novel has one protagonist usually. So it is that novel's protagonist. Do we have more than one novel? No, we know it's Poet X, this one novel. So we need singular, possessive, A. Let's do another medium one here. Again, pause it, try it on your own first, but here we go. So this one, because we're dealing with pronouns, and I can see we've got options between its versus their, I am going to read the first sentence because we need to know what the pronoun is referring to. So we have this poet's star quilt poems. So star quilt poems is the main subject of that first sentence. Offer an unusually open-ended reading experience with their 8 panels of text stitched together, I don't care about the rest. It is referring to those poems, which is plural, which is why I said there out loud. So we know it's not B, we know it's not D. Is it possessive or is it they are? With they are 8 panels, reading it out loud makes it pretty clear. It has to be possessive. And yeah, they do possess these panels if, these panels are a part of them. So it would be A, their, possessive. All right, these next couple of questions here, you are not going to be able to find in College Board's question bank. You will be able to find them in my new grammar and punctuation online course that I'm working on. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the video, but for now, pause the video and try this question on your own first. I'm already seeing some pretty long answer choices, so I'm thinking context might be good to know here. I'm going to start from the beginning. We get at the entrance of the treacherous dungeon, the adventurers pause to consider their options. The group's fate rested on their, or the group's face rested on its, chosen path through the labyrinth. And we can go ahead and stop there, ignore the rest of this stuff. And as I consider, I think I will also ignore that first sentence. Does the fate belong to the group or the groups? Yes, so it's going to be possessive, so definitely not B. And do we have more than one group? Well, it says the adventurers. We can infer that the adventurers are, in this one group together. So it's going to be singular possessive, so we'll get rid of A. And then it looks like we're dealing with its, which might throw some of you off because if you think of a group, it has more than one person in it, right? However, a group is a singular unit. So we do want singular its, and then chosen path. Does the chosen path belong to the group? Yes. So we'd want the possessive, no apostrophe, C as our answer here. All right, last question. Try it on your own first. Jim and Lucas bought a house together. I think it's crazy because they've only known each other for 6 weeks and from work, mind you. That said, Jim's and Lucas, the house is amazing and I hope it works out for them. Okay, so do you remember the rule that we talked about for these types of questions? First of all, do we have any options where they're not possessive? No, they're all showing some sort of possession. And yeah, it's their house, right? We know that. So what is the rule here? Well, they own the house together. So we only need possession on the last noun in the list, Jim and Lucas's B. The first step when dealing with pronoun questions is to find the noun that the pronoun is replacing. And that's called the antecedent for all my fancy pants students out there. So that's going to be step one. On this question, for example, we've got our blank space. Many people don't know blank exists. If I go back to the sentence before, I see that Arcata is my antecedent. So that would be step one. Step two, just match the correct pronoun with that antecedent. So if my original noun is Arcata, I have to think, is Arcata singular or plural? It's singular, right? And is Arcata a person? So would I use he or she? Or is Arcata not a person? It's not a person. So I'm going to use the singular pronoun it. And that's really it. That's the two-step process. But for some questions, it's going to get a little bit more complicated. It's not going to be quite as easy to find the antecedent per se. So let's do some example problems so that you can actually practice this process. Let's start with an easy example. So step one, I need to find my antecedent. And for context, I usually like to read the whole thing. So we get American poet Emily Dickinson wrote many of her poems on scraps of paper, but she also took steps to collect these works. From 1858 to 1864, for example, she copied more than 800 of blank into 40 handmade booklets. So just from reading that out loud, I can tell that these works is the original noun that we are replacing. And technically, these works is referring to poems too. Regardless, both of these are plural, so we're going to want them, choice A. All right, so that first one was obviously pretty easy, but now we're dealing with a medium question. And with the medium and hard-based pronoun questions, sometimes you're going to have to focus on, or rather not focus on, certain parts of the sentence. Here, for example, we've got the human brain is primed to recognize faces, so much so that due to perceptual tendency called something, blank will even find faces in clouds. So this is a little bit more complicated because we've got all this information between our antecedent and our pronoun. What can happen is sometimes you'll think, the word right next to the blank space is our antecedent. If you go back, we might think that faces is our antecedent. So you have to be careful by focusing on context and also looking out for things like non essential information that you can ignore. So, like, we have this little comma sandwich here. That tells me I could ignore all of this. And then contextually, we get blank will even find faces in clouds, wooden doors, pieces of fruit. The first thing we get is the human brain is primed to recognize faces. So, do faces find faces or does the human brain find faces? The human brain finds faces, right? Human brain is singular, so we want singular it. Our answer is C. All right, moving on to a hard one here. Now, just from looking at the answer choices, we can see that there's something a little bit different going on here. It looks like we might be dealing with possession because I'm seeing apostrophes. And speaking of which, we're dealing with apostrophes along with pronouns. So this is actually starting to bleed into what I would even consider maybe a separate category of apostrophe use. I've actually got a video on that. So definitely check that out after this if you want more on those types of questions. But let's go ahead and do our strategy. And I'll start from the beginning here just to get context. When they were first discovered in Australia in 1798, duck billed, beaver tailed platypuses so defied categorization that one scientist assigned them the name OP. Whenever you've got these scientific words that are way too long, just call them by their initials. Um, Paradoxical bird snout. That's hilarious. But yeah, platypuses are pretty weird looking, huh? The animal, which lays eggs but also nurses blank young with milk. Okay, so here it seems pretty clear to me that the antecedent is the animal, right? Nurses young with milk. Because it does say the animal singular. So I would want it, right? Now, in this case, we have two different options, and both of them are its because we're saying it's young. It's young, the young that belong to it. Um, it's young being its babies, basically. Then the question becomes which one of these its is the its that I want? And the simple rule to remember with there, it's, and whose is that the apostrophe is going to go to the contraction. A contraction being when you combine two words together. So, choice D, for example, is the contraction it is. And we do not want to say, but also nurses it is young with milk. That doesn't make sense, right? It's with no apostrophe is actually our possessive it's. So our answer here is C. And just FYI, this video is basically a sneak peek into my SAT punctuation and grammar course, which is designed to get you 100% on standard English conventions. The course includes over 100 practice problems that you're not going to find on College Board or anywhere else. You can knock the whole thing out in about 3 to 4 hours. And if you use the link in the description of this video, you're going to get a big old discount. So if you don't already have a really good understanding of how all the grammar and punctuation works on the SAT, I highly recommend taking that course. So in a nutshell, the rule with modifiers is that whoever or whatever is described before the comma must come right after the comma. And maybe you're thinking, what are you talking about? What comma? Well, these questions are always going to be easy to recognize because A, you're going to get all of these different answers that start with different subjects. And B, the answer choices are always going to come after a comma. All right. So in this sentence, for example, we have eager to impress his boss at the annual company picnic. This is our modifier, the part that comes before the comma, right? And we need to ask ourselves who or what is being described. Specifically in this sentence, who or what is eager to impress his boss? So, just from his boss, we know that it needs to be a who. We also know it needs to be a male who because it's his, right? So then Some sort of a male person needs to come right after the comma. And I'm already showing you how these questions can get a little bit tricky because we have Dave, right? The problem is Dave is not the subject right after the comma because we've got this guy, little apostrophe. And if you saw my apostrophe video, you're going to know that this means Dave is possessing something in this sentence. So, really, it's Dave's unfortunate decision, and decision is the main subject after the comma. Since a decision is not the thing that's eager to impress his boss, this is, according to the SAT, incorrect. What we would want to do is something like this. Eager to impress his boss at the annual company picnic, Dave made the unfortunate decision to showcase his juggling skills. Now, we just have Dave after the comma, and since Dave is being described before the comma, we are good. We are following the modifier rule. So, that is the rule of these misplaced modifiers that you're going to see on the SAT. Let's do some practice questions real quick so you can solidify this knowledge. So, we're actually going to start with a medium question here because, believe it or not, there are no easy modifier questions in the College Board question bank. This scares some students away, but like I said, as long as we follow that rule, we should be good. Do me a favor, pause the video. I want you to try this question on your own using that rule we just talked about. Try it on your own first, but let's go ahead and get into it. So, our modifier is far from being modern inventions. So, whatever comes after the comma needs to be far from being a modern invention. All right. Choice A says Sumerians. Sumerians are people, not inventions, so it can't be A. B, drinking straws. Drinking straws were an invention, so I would keep that one. Choice C, the use of drinking straws. Oh, okay, so you can see where these get a little bit tricky. So is the use of drinking straws an invention? No, the straws themselves would be the invention, right? So C is not our answer. D, ancient Mesopotamia is a place, not an invention. So D is out, and just like that, our answer is B. All right, let's move on to a hard one, and this will be one of two hard practice questions that we do. Same deal, I want you to pause the video and try this one on your own first, but let's take a look. Known as Earth's living skin, biocrusts are thin layers of soil held together by surface-dwelling microorganisms such as fungi, lichens, and CB, I'll call it, fortifying soil and arid ecosystems against erosion. So whatever comes after the comma needs to be something that is capable of fortifying soil. Choice A, a recent studies estimate. No, a recent studies estimate certainly can't fortify soil. And honestly, I don't even know what fortifying soil is per se, but I know that a studies estimate certainly can't do it. B, an estimated 60% reduction in global dust emissions. Okay, so a reduction in dust emissions, that is something that happens, which again wouldn't be able to fortify soil. So B is also out. And just to be clear, I don't know what fortifying soil is, but I can tell that it's some sort of an actual physical effect on the soil, right? I imagine it's something like enriching the soil, but basically, I know it's a physical, palpable thing that's happening to the soil. That's why I was able to get rid of choices A and B. Okay, C. These crusts. All right, these crusts. Now, because it says these crusts, I do want to go back and see what crusts it's referring to. Known as Earth's living skin, biocrusts. So, biocrusts are the thin layers of soil held together by these surface dwelling microorganisms. All right, so can this physical thing, these crusts, fortify soil? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but is it possible? Yes, because this is the first actual physical thing that we have that could have a physical effect. So C, I'm going to keep. And then D says a recent study. A study cannot fortify soil for sure. So even though this is a bit, scientific and I am not a scientist, I was still able to get rid of three answers and confidently choose C as my correct answer. All right, we got one more hard question here. Pause the video, try it on your own first, but let's take a look. In the canon of North African literature, Moroccan author Driss Trabies, Driss, that is a really cool name. The Simple Past, 1954 novel, The Simple Past, looms large. A coming of age story, a social meditation, and a sober gaze into the dark maw of French colonialism. Okay. So here we have something interesting going on. We basically have like three different modifiers. So I could really match up my subject to any of these. I'm just going to start with a coming of age story because that seems like the easiest, least convoluted choice to compare my subjects to. So looking at choice A, Morocco is a place, not a story. So Morocco is out. Traby's debut novel. A novel is a story, so I would keep that. Trabi. We know from the first sentence that Trabi, and I am certainly not pronouncing that right, but this person is not a story. This person is the author of the story, so C would also not work. Published. We have a straight up verb. A verb is not a story. It's not even a subject, so that really doesn't work. And just like that, we got our correct answer, which is choice B. So step one is actually going to take care of most verb problems on the SAT because thus far, most questions tend to be subject-verb agreement. And you're either going to be getting subject-verb agreement or you're going to be getting verb tense. But this odd verb out trick is going to work for subject-verb agreement questions. So step one is to try the odd verb out trick. The trick is we want to figure out which verb is not like the others. And the way that we test this is by using they and choosing to use either he, she, or it. I'm going to use it for this example. So I would match up with my answer choices. They were, they have been, they are, it was. Notice how was is the only one that goes with it, and the others went with they. And what I'm testing here is trying to figure out which one of these is plural while the other three are singular, or which one of these is singular while the other three are plural. So by using they and then either he, she, or it makes that process really simple. And the great news is if you find an odd verb out, that odd verb out is your answer. You're done, right? And that's how easy it's going to be for subject-verb agreement questions. Now, I did mention that they're not all subject-verb agreement questions. You will also get some tense questions and some infinitive use, although technically you could sort of lump infinitive use into tense as well. But basically, if there is not an odd verb out, then you move on to step two, checking for tense. So in this case, if I try they vow, I could say they vowed or he vowed, right? So already just by looking at the first two answers, I know there's not going to be an odd verb out. So at this point, it's all about figuring out what the tense is. In this question, I'm seeing a vow they upheld, single past tense. So I'm going to know that I want the single past tense vowed, choice B, as my answer. It is really simple in theory, but if you don't practice it, you're not going to be able to get through these questions with confidence. So let's get some practice questions in as well. All right, we've got our first example here, and I definitely encourage you to pause the video and try these questions on your own first. This video is going to be a lot more helpful if you actually get some practice in, but let's go through it. So remember, step one is the odd verb out. We'll go they reach, they had reached, or he had reached. So I know I'm dealing with tense. Moving on to step two, let's look for context. If simple sugars such as this and this blank Earth from elsewhere and survived, so right in that same phrase, we have and survived. So I know I want past tense, possibly simple past tense. So choice A is simple present tense. Choice B is past perfect tense. It is a form of past tense, so I'll keep that. Choice C is basically future tense, will, and choice D is present continuous tense. So our only past tense option, even though it's not the simple past tense, is choice B, which makes a pretty easy answer, choice B. All right, we got a medium question here. Same thing, pause the video, try it on your own first, but let's go. Start with the odd verb out trick. They are taking, they have taken, they take. She takes. My odd verb out is D. My answer is D. Just like that. All right, this one is rated hard. Go ahead and try it on your own first, but let's start with the odd verb out trick. He already served, or they already served. So immediately I know this is going to be tense. So I'll read for context. A second generation Japanese American, WM blank in World War II and won. All right, so we have simple past tense won. So I know at the very least I need some form of past tense, just like the first question we did. And I'm specifying simple past tense because a lot of the time you'll want to match simple with simple. But the big takeaway here is let's get rid of any present tense options first. So choice A, already served. So served is going to be past tense, right? So we can keep that one. B, was already serving, also past tense. C, already serves. That is present tense. And specifically, like already obviously doesn't have a tense. So I'm focusing more on the verbs, right? Was serving is past continuous. Serves is simple present tense. So C is definitely out. And then D, had already served. This is going to be past perfect tense. So at this point, this hard question could actually be kind of hard if you don't know what these different tenses are used for in English. If you are not a native speaker of English, these are probably rules that you need to learn. But if you are a native speaker of English, if you were born speaking English, you should be able to kind of hear what sounds right just by reading things out loud. And for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to go into great detail about what all the different tenses do. But if you would be interested in something like that, let me know in the comments. All right, so a little bit more context. This person served in World War II and won 2 amateur national basketball championships when he joined the New York Knicks for the 1947 through 48 season. Okay, so this is the clue I was looking for. When is going to mean something happened at the same time as this thing that happened in 1947. And then interestingly, we get the serving in World War II happens before this, right? So now we know we're in the past and we're not talking about two things happening simultaneously. We're basically saying this had already happened when this other thing happened. And I just said it out loud. I just used the past perfect tense because that's actually exactly what we want to use in this situation. So saying it out loud, WM had already served in World War II when he joined the New York Knicks in 1947. So he had already done this thing when he did this other thing, if that makes sense. So our choice is D. And again, if that is just super confusing to you, I would recommend not choice A, but I would recommend first try reading the other answers out loud and simplifying things like I did, and you'll see how they don't work. So, like, if we get rid of this stuff, we have WM already served when he joined the New York Knicks. And keeping in mind that this is something that happened later. See how that doesn't really make sense? Same thing. AM was already serving in World War II when he joined the New York Knicks. Like, how could he already be doing something in the past when he did something in the future? So you see how A and B break down. And again, if you do want me to do a more detailed video on the different tenses in English, like, let me know in the comments. I just don't imagine a lot of you would be interested in that because this is such a small portion of the SAT. But anyway, let's do one more hard question. All right, we've got a hard question. Try the strategy on your own first, but here we go. Step 1, odd verb out. She hasn't been. She wasn't. She isn't. They aren't. Odd verb out is D. My answer is D. And that's right. This is a hard question according to the SAT. Just wanted to kind of show off how powerful that trick is. And the good news is, like I was saying, at least in the exams that we've seen in 2024, most of your verb questions are going to be this type of subject verb agreement question. Now, these questions obviously go hand in hand with punctuation questions under the umbrella of standard English conventions. And this video right here is going to cover all of the punctuation rules that you need to know for the SAT.